Welcome to Startup Hacks, a We Global podcast. We explore the stories and secret strategies that women entrepreneurs use to save time and money when bootstrapping and building their businesses. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina. Welcome back to another episode of Startup Hacks. I'm your host, Fernanda Carapina, and today I'm very excited to welcome Liz Heller. Entrepreneur Liz Heller activates profound, game-changing ideas for companies that matter. As managing partner at memBrain, she is an early-stage investor and advisor, unearthing good ideas and turning them into great ideas, and then bringing them to market. Liz is currently incubating Highly Mobile, a product development company combining science, design, form, and function to enhance and support human mobility for seniors. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Fernanda.
It is my pleasure. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to steal you away to talk about some of your work experience and your stories. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, if you would give the listeners a little backstory on who Liz is, where you grew up, how you got started in entertainment and music, and give us a little context to your life, early days as a young kid into professional life.
Well, let's see. The first thing I like to say to people is I was born in 90210. Please don't hold it against me. My mother and father actually moved there for the school system, which at the time was one of the number one or two, depending on the year in the country. And they wanted me to be able to, have the opportunity for great education. I was also born at UCLA, where I ultimately went to college and graduated from as well. So I'm a real native of Los Angeles in that way. And
Great.
I am the child of my parents, for sure. My mother was an unbelievably, extraordinarily committed, passionate, real game changer in the field of social activism, and a real activist across many important issues. One of them was about old age and people who are too young to be treated with the kind of rights that she felt that the Grey Panthers, which is the organization, that people who are too young to be felt that they should have rights that they were not. And the same thing with people over 65 should not have to retire if they didn't want, and the rights that went along with that. And it took me a long time to realize how many things I'm involved in today came as a direct response and inspiration from my mother. But her main work was in the field of feminism and women's rights, really all rights. Also consumer and environmental rights was very important to her. And she had a doctrine that was kind of her life's work, which was called the committee. I just blanked out the first part of it, the elimination of discrimination against women. And it was a doctrine that was ratified by the United Nations, and then it's everywhere but Afghanistan and the U.S. And the U.S. was mostly because of the constant change of Congress, I think, more than anything else. But she lobbied like crazy, and ultimately, it has now been adopted as something called the status of women in most cities, about 125 of them, I think, at the moment, or maybe more. And it was really her work with a number of incredible women back in the day that started this conversation about that. And it's great to see that it ultimately seeded itself within cities and took hold and has a great impact on sort of various issues for women in cities in America. My father was a personal manager, and a real character, one of the truly unique spirits on this planet in terms of his just general outlook on life and positive optimism. And he just loved everybody and everything. And he managed many artists, but the one that he was probably the closest and longest term was, well, not the longest term, actually. He managed a group from Las Vegas called the Treniers, which I recently found out that Barry Gordy told me he used to take all the Motown acts there to study the Treniers. And they were a live act and they were a lounge act. He managed them for 57 years.
Wow.
And his other clients, he managed Ginger Rogers and Debbie Reynolds and big band singers and everybody. But his main client and his dearest friend was Liberace, who he managed for 39 years.
Wow.
So
what a history.
I think, it was really unique and fun in that way too, because they just had many adventures. And my father really believed in, absolutely, truly believed in everything that my mother stood for. So if it meant that he had to stay up till 2 a.m. licking envelopes for some movement and some mailer, he would do it. If he would drive her to the post office at 3 a.m. in order to get the letters out faster, so she could, impact people when there was a timeline or a deadline and things like that. And so I think I really got from both of them just a lot of ideas about what to, sort of how to make things happen and how to really be committed to people, loyalty, trust, sort of ingenuity and resourcefulness, because they were always trying to figure out how to make, something happen that hadn't happened yet. So I really believe that I'm a child of my parents. That was kind of really, I think, the point that I was trying to make. And I feel lucky to have had both of them in my life for as long as they did in both cases. They both passed away now. So anyway, yeah. But,
wow, what a great mashup.
True.
Right?
And
yeah. No, go ahead.
They both had really serious work ethics as well. No, I was just saying that was part of how I got started, which was that I always had jobs, and that and if I didn't have any, I would make them up. So we had office in my bedroom, lots of different kinds of companies and entities. And I told the story the other day, but when my best friend and I were 15, we actually started our very first company. Not for real, but I didn't realize till later it was actually very relevant. But it was called "You'll Be Hearing from Us" Inc.
Oh,
and
really?
we even had T-shirts made and everything. And that was because, not to date myself, but at the time, I was one of the first people in Beverly Hills to get what was called a princess phone. And the princess phone was like the one that everybody, every picture you've ever seen of like kids in the 60s and the 50s, they had this sort of fun little kind of oval phone. But on the princess phone, the thing I got on the very first day, I should say, was something that was called three-way calling. And basically, I could figure out how to call two people at the same time without them knowing by pushing the phone down very quickly. I've never told this story in public. I've just realized that. But anyway, you get on the thing, and so we would call somebody, and we'd say, we'd see if they were home. So let's say it was a boy and a girl that just broke up, but we'd, including boys that had just broken up with my friend, which was the genesis of the company. And we would call up, and they would answer the phone, and then we'd hang up, and very quickly, like the Wicked Witch of the Wizard of Oz, we'd go, "You'll be hearing from us." And then we'd hang up and quickly call the other person, and then we would conference them together, and they would have these crazy phone calls because, of course, one who was upset with that person thought that the person was calling and they were trying to make up, and the other one who was dying to hear from that person, or was like, "Wait a minute, you just called me," and they're like, "No, I didn't. You called me," and they would have these crazy conversations. And the way that you got shares in our company was to give us phone numbers.
Oh, really?
So years later, I realized I was very entrepreneurial even then, even though I didn't realize it. But
you were starting your marketing list.
Exactly.
That's so funny. So were you inspired by your dad to pursue music as a career option early on?
Yes and no. Yes, because it was something that I spent a lot of time in many summer theaters and I was at the Las Vegas Hilton the night that Elvis opened it. I saw the Beatles at, Hollywood Bowl. My father, when I was 8 years old, took me with four of my friends, or four total, to the Monkees set. I thought that was like the greatest thing ever.
Right.
There's a very funny story about that, which I'll tell you another time. But and so I think I definitely think so. But for me, the other part of that was that I really loved being just like my father, which was behind the scenes. I loved being a part of the experience. I didn't have a desire to be in front of, on stage, if you will, in that way. I definitely got that from my father. The part that was difficult about it was that my father's identity was absolutely tied in many ways to the clients that he managed. And I see that now and I see this as a big change for right now, which I really think is fantastic. But so my father his name was Seymour Heller. He's a Seymour Heller, Liberace's manager. That was his title, and that was his identity. And when Liberace passed away, my father suffered from a real identity crisis. That because he, of course, had been Liberace's manager for 39 years and many other 40 years, many, many other people. But it didn't change the way that he saw himself. And he had that happen to him. And I really thought about it a lot at the time and tried to sort of make him feel better, and as daughters do when they adore their fathers, especially, like, and I thought, I don't really want that to happen to me. I don't really want my identity to be tied to something that is unless I am comfortable with that. And I've seen this happen a lot with brilliant creatives who then sell their name. For example, Donna Karan or John Hardy or some of these other brands where the name is affiliated to the brand and the person is still very much alive and doing something fabulous still, right?
Yeah.
In both cases, Donna and John. So I'm not saying they were upset about it, but I'm saying I understood how they might feel because it's a strange thing, right? And then on the other side of it, it's something that you built that's a legacy, and you can be pretty proud of it. But in the service business, it doesn't actually work that way. They were in the sort of brand and products business in that way, in that sense. But it was sort of something that I thought a lot about when I was starting out in terms of, even all of my first sort of jobs in the record company and all of those first things, it was always your name and then the name of your record company or the name of the company that you worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen an evolution in that, and I think it's important. And there's a really powerful book that I read about this. It was written by a friend of mine called Make a Name for Yourself. And it's about understanding who you are as a brand, and especially for women.
Yeah.
And so that was very, sort of another piece of that story. I might be off on a little tangent. I'm sorry.
No, it's a great tangent. I'm glad you raised it. And that sounds like a really good book. So when you,
it's a great book.
I'm going to definitely check it out myself. When you started working,
Robin, she'd be great for you to have on your show.
I would love that. And I'm really actually, when I left, just a sidebar note, when I left the entertainment business, I went and had lunch with a friend who was a director of a very well-known TV series. And I was starting out as a writer-producer independently after having left a big senior job. And she said, you're going to have to get comfortable now with having a business card on it, with having a business card with a name on it that says, I'm nobody. Because of that whole idea that everyone's value is wrapped up with where you work and what your title is. And one of my guests on the show, whose name is Joanna Bloor, all of her work is all about personal brand and personal value, and not basing your value on your historical work, but about the future you. And I think that for entrepreneurs in particular, which you are, and you know this all too well, it is so incredibly important to have that depth of confidence and that sense of self and what you bring to the table. And that's not something that historically has been nurtured in gals like us, because we kind of grew up in more the corporate world. And it is really encouraging to see young women who have a very different mindset and don't have those legacy issues. And that's actually some of the work on the We Global side that I'm really encouraged to do. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about your experience then as an entrepreneur and creating your own businesses and following your bliss.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one thing that I've kind of, and I say this because I think it's important to think about it, and there's no bad answer to what I'm about to say, and either one is okay. But there are sort of two kinds of opportunities. You are either an entrepreneur or you are entrepreneurial. And they're not exactly the same. And these are my definitions. I'm not talking about dictionary definitions. But I say that because for the first significant portion of my working career life, I was working within corporations doing something that had never been done before, which is not easy to do. But if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, it works very well because you sort of are willing to do what it takes and try to, get everybody on board and push get the train up the mountain and make it all happen and to be kind of fearless about it. And so for me, I had an operating principle, which was, well, if anything that I am doing is better than what was being done before, then I will not fail. I cannot fail, or you will not fail, I would say to people. And so I would often have positions inside of a corporation that no one else had ever done before. Therefore, of course, I couldn't fail because there was no one that failed before me. And so I really, and it sounds so silly, but it's true. And so I kind of realized after a long time that I was definitely always excited about the idea of being doing things that had never been done before. Mm-hmm. But inside of a company, it's really a little bit more of a very different feeling to be entrepreneurial. And I say this to a lot of women also because I think it's okay to be entrepreneurial. In fact, it's quite fabulous. And so this